Thank you for staying with us this hour here on One American News. I'm Stephanie Myers. It's been just over 2 months since Joe Biden was inaugurated. And over the course of that period, a range of issues have taken center stage, such as the partisan COVID relief package, humanitarian crisis at the southern border, and North Korea's aggression, just to name a few. But we continue to hear Democrats and the mainstream media blaming his predecessor for the current problems we're seeing. Here to discuss this further is the CEO of AMW PR, Adam Weiss, who is also a political strategist. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
Biden held his first solo press conference as president on Thursday. What did you make of the media's response to that briefing and just how he did with his first solo briefing?
I mean, I don't know where to start, but if we were to teach a lesson or a course in journalism, which I do occasionally, there's so many things wrong with that press conference. You know, the time he did it during the day. You know, remember President Trump used to do these daily press conferences during COVID at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock when everybody's getting home, when you have the most viewers in the United States. He did it at 1:15 early, which is kind of bizarre when you know, thinking that you want to speak to the whole country. The amount of questions he only took 10. The softballs that were given. I mean, the reason in sports we call it a softball is it's so easy to hit, right? Hard balls aren't easy to hit. These were the biggest softballs imaginable. I mean, and not only were they softballs, they would never even as follow-ups. I mean, Trump's press conference were like, you know, would go viral. Every one he did, they were just battering. It was like watching a UFC or a WWE wrestling match, the combativeness that the press had towards him. And he still would come daily. He'd fight the fight. This was a joke. I remember the second question I was watching from, I believe Lucinda from PBS, was Mr. Biden, what do you think these evil Republicans are doing? Shouldn't you end the filibuster? I said, if you were sitting in the DNC meeting, that's like a strategist. That's an activist. These aren't reporters. Not only they don't even ask the questions, they don't never ask a follow-up question. Forget about even asking the original questions that we need to know, from all his executive orders to his policies on the border. So, I mean, it's a really scary time we're living in, because the extra branch of government, kind of the fourth estate, the press, that should be there fighting for the American people. At least they should fight for some of the 75 million people that, voted for Trump and the GOP and, believe in other causes that aren't just liberal activists masquerading as, journalists.
And it's interesting, too, because he waited so long to give a solo press briefing, and he cited coronavirus. But then you have his press secretary, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, who gives these daily briefings to reporters. So it just conflicts with what his press secretary is doing. So it was interesting to see that. And as you pointed out, he only took a handful of questions. Now, you recently wrote an op-ed in Town Hall on the media's treatment of President Trump while he was in office, titled "How the Media Could Have Saved Lives If They Covered Cuomo Half as Critically as They Did Trump's Ice Cream." Tell us more about that article and what you mean by that.
I mean, I still have an office in New York City and my employees there, but I moved. Couple of my employees moved down to Miami Beach for the meantime, because I just couldn't stand the policies of New York State, New York City. I mean, it's just a ghost town of what it once was. I mean, from every day was a different excuse, and it was just watching this buffoon of a governor highlight himself and his policies like he was the savior, and the policy was so bad, but yet he was getting praise every day from the media. Not only was he getting praise, he got a book deal, from one of the biggest publishers in the country. He got an Emmy Award from Hollywood. It's like, and it wasn't like the evidence wasn't there from the very beginning. His executive order led to the deaths of 15,000 seniors by saying, you have to take in your senior, Mrs. Jones or Mr. Jones, whether they have COVID or not, you still have to take them back into the nursing home. That policy is horrible. Destroying business. 1/3 of restaurants are closed forever. Businesses. Offices are empty in New York. The great experiment we know is Manhattan, that everybody in the country used to say, have you been to New York City? Yes, I visited. It's amazing. That flourishes because people go to offices. They spend money during the day. They make the economy go. Broadway closed. So watching this, I'm like, this guy is terrible with policies, but he loves getting highlights. So
Mm.
if the media covered this as half as they did, when they covered Trump, everything Trump said was bad guy. So when it was great for the press, bad guy was Trump, good guy was Cuomo every day. Now that Biden and Harris won, they don't need him anymore. So what they created after this terrible policy of senior citizens, the one thing that might take him down is that he was rude, unethical, and said some harsh and terrible things to some of the employees. But think what a bad boss he must have been, because of all these women were at the highest levels of government, aides to the governor, executive assistant to the governor, commissioner, and they all went to the press saying that he once asked me if I played strip poker. He once asked me if I would date older men. And this is after all these things that he did, these terrible policies. If that takes him out of office, it's kind of what they created, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it was interesting to see how his brother, CNN anchor Chris Cuomo, because CNN, they were saying, oh, it's been difficult for Chris to cover this, of course, because it's his brother, but there was no problem when Governor Cuomo received that Emmy and book deal. He had him on all the time. It was nothing. And then now you're seeing what's going on with Governor Cuomo and how CNN is reacting to that. Now, according to a 2020 Gallup poll, only 40% of Americans surveyed said they have a great deal or fair amount of trust and confidence in the media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. Do you see this trend shifting anytime soon?
No, because it's gotten worse. I was on the call with somebody the day of the press conference that he said, well, I think they're moving in the right direction. I said, I hope you are correct. I hope you're right. But everything I'm seeing so far, not only are they not, the press has gotten so bad because they're kind of like activists at this point, where even when President Obama or President Clinton was president, they never covered Democrats as harsh as they covered Republicans, but they used to cover the story. What I mean by that is they would cover, let's say, Solyndra, which was during the Obama era, or the IRS. They would cover it, but they would never move the story forward. What I say in class is move the story forward by you go out and you find the victim. Then you do the story, the victim, what's the victim, how did you get hurt by this policy? So they would just cover the initial story. With Republicans, they always cover the story. They move the story forward. So what we'd get when it was the Trump administration, he says something bad. We run to Republican leadership. We say, how do you feel about what Donald Trump just said? Or what do you think about him lying? And they don't even know what they're talking about yet, but they'll capture the Republicans. They'll get a soundbite. They'll keep moving it forward. Now they don't even cover the initial story. All his executive orders, whether it's the title of this, where they're not allowing, where they're saying, yes, biological males, if they decide they're females, can go play in women's sports that day. Yeah, I don't even see, you can't Google a story from the mainstream media covering that or moving it forward. Keystone Pipeline killing 15,000, 20,000 jobs from Pennsylvania to West Virginia to the Dakotas, all these jobs across America. You can't see a story even moving it forward where they're out talking to the families who are about to lose their homes, who are about to, can't afford their child care anymore. That's what they do when it's a Democrat policy. But not only are they aren't covering it the second, they're not even covering the initial story, which is so, bad for the American policy. So that's what we see right now, that because Democrats have become activists, and I mean, journalists have become activists, which is, not a great thing for our democracy. And what happened, why the Gallup poll is, so negative towards journalists. One thing President Trump did day after day after day for 4.5, 5 years, he fought back against the media. So even if weren't a political pro or you weren't involved in the political process all the time, you saw constantly the President Trump fighting back, and the American people were like, I see what he's talking about. I see how biased they are. So it's a good thing that he did. So it allows people to say, yes, we do have a bias, and I have to look for alternative news, and let's watch OANN every day because we need some fair and balanced news.
Absolutely. And a lot of people have painted the picture of when Twitter, they censored that New York Post article regarding Hunter Biden and that whole now infamous laptop scheme, if you will. So that was something that also was a wake-up call for a lot of people saying, okay, not only is the mainstream media playing part in this, but big tech as well. Lastly, where can our viewers go to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, they can go to amwpr.com. That's our communications company, PR company, and we're here. So, or at Adam Matthew is my Twitter handle. And, hopefully all your viewers will continue to watch and grow a good network. We need more alternative news then, because the mainstream media is not doing their job right now. So.
Absolutely. Adam Weiss, again, the CEO of AMW PR and media and political strategist. Thank you so much again for your time and input.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.